views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Good evening and welcome to Bronxtalk. When you debut a TV show, as we did on October 5th, 1994, 21 years ago, you don't look more than a week or two ahead, never considering that you'll be sitting in the same spot doing the same thing decades later. Well, here we are in September 2015 as we begin our 1,000th program. Hard to believe, but true. As of tonight, I've welcomed Bronxites to Bronxtalk 1,000 times. It's an incredible number, one that I really cannot fathom. And one guest has been with us on 24 of those 1,000 programs over the years, and tonight he makes his 25th appearance on Bronxtalk, which is more than any other guest. He was on the program for the first time in February 1996, even before he was elected to the State Assembly. And so tonight on our 1,000th program, we will approach it the same way we have for the first 999. We'll ask Borough President Ruben Diaz Jr. about Legionnaire's disease, a wide range of development issues, education, politics, and much more. Because he takes phone calls on his News 12 program each month, and in order to maximize our time with him, we don't take phone calls during his appearances on Bronxtalk. To speak with the Borough President on air, call into the News 12 program, or if you'd like, you can send questions or comments to us at bronxtalk@bronxnet.org, and we will forward them to him directly and get you an answer. Good evening to the Borough President of the Bronx, Ruben Diaz Jr., the record setter.
And with that, what is it, like 2.5% of the time I've been on the show?
There you go, and the Borough President knows math,
Look,
too.
I congratulate you. 1,000 is monumental. I think that surpasses David Letterman and Jay Leno and all those guys there. It puts you right up there with Sábado Gigante, I guess.
I guess so. That's what it does. Listen,
congratulations, though, Gary. We're really proud of you. And
thank you.
And even when we have to come in and answer some of the tough questions, the reality is that we know that you do this wanting to inform Bronxites, and you've been doing it for quite some time, and you do it well. Thank you.
I have a little present for you before we start. We discovered in my mother's home, as a matter of fact, this is the Borough of the Bronx turned 100, right? This is the booklet that was given out at the borough's 50th anniversary. This is a first-hand historical document that documents the Borough of the Bronx 50 years ago, and I'll give that to you, and you can keep it with the borough's archives. One of the things I just discovered, there was the architect's model drawing of Bronx Community College and what it would look like when it's completed. So there you go, Mr. Borough President.
What was this, 1964?
I guess
this is amazing.
Right.
Yeah.
There you go.
Thank you.
That was for our 50th anniversary on our 1,000th show. All right, let's start. Legionnaire's disease. Then we go from the sublime to the really very terrible. It was horrible. People lost their lives. So many were infected. What's your analysis of what happened and evaluation of the city's response?
Well, this is something that really hit us hard. It was a crisis. To think that we lost 12 lives in a matter of 2.5 weeks in such a small area of the Bronx, something that the city has never seen before, 127 people sick. Initially, I thought that the city was reassuring us that they were on top of it, but then I realized that we needed to do much more, that we need to have all boots on the ground. I wind up calling the governor, who brought in the state Department of Health, Dr. Zucker. We spoke with the CDC, and they brought in about 200 some odd inspectors to test all of the towers, not only in that area that was impacted, but also throughout the entire borough of the Bronx. It was a scary moment. My thoughts and prayers go out to those 12 the 12 families that lost members, that lost loved ones. And with the legislation that we introduced through Councilwoman Vanessa Gibson, so that throughout the city of New York we can have the documentation, so that we can have the recording, the testing, and the cleaning of these towers. Hopefully this will never happen again in the Bronx or any other place in the city of New York.
A study by the city's Department of Health said that risk factors are linked to Legionnaire's disease. I'm sure you've heard this. Poverty level, underlying medical conditions like diabetes, smoking, and airborne diseases like asthma, which of course is still a big problem in the Bronx. So while tragic, in a way it's almost predictable for the population. Let's just talk about that. What's to be done about kind of the low level of, and certainly you have your Not 62 program, but really about the airborne disease problem in the Bronx?
Well, before we get to that, you got to understand that this was more of an amplified situation because of the cooling towers. So in any year in the city of New York, you get anywhere between 200 and 300 cases, and about 5 to 10% of the people who contract the Legionella bacteria, they can die. In fact, I just went to a funeral over the weekend in Brooklyn. A family member of someone from the Bronx, he had Hep C, contracted Legionella, and passed away at the tender age of 47. So this happens throughout the city. What happened in this case is that the cooling systems, they spew this out into the air, and that's how you can get a more amplified amount of people who can contract this virus.
Although people in the Bronx are more, the implication of what I was saying, that people in the Bronx are more susceptible to it.
What I did is that I challenged the Department of Health, the commissioners in the city and the state, and everyone, that this begs a larger question as to how is it that we prevent health ailments and deal with the health disparities in the Bronx. We do have the hashtag Not62 campaign, which is a social media campaign. We want Bronxites to be able to give each other tips on how to handle equipment in the gym, what type of exercises to do, how to eat healthier, maybe some health tips and recipes, so that we can all get healthy together. We have the CAN initiative. We just did something the other day with the National Hispanic Health Foundation and the Urban Health Plan in order for us to address and really have a serious conversation with parents and adults on childhood obesity and how we have to change some of our behaviors at home, how we cook, what type of spices we use, salt, sugar. So I think that this educated us not only on Legionnaires and what do we have to do to be mindful when someone has the symptoms of Legionnaires, but also how we take care of ourselves so that we don't have all of the health indicators that make us susceptible to contracting Legionnaire.
You participated in a press conference with Senator Gillibrand to put monies toward medication, equipment, and training in fighting airborne diseases. How about getting to the root causes? I mean, is there anybody in the Bronx concretely trying to limit the number of trucks that ride through our streets? And I'll give you an example. The Willets Point project was, apparently the city has squashed it. There's still some question of what exactly is going to happen there. But the plan was to take the auto businesses from there and locate them in the Bronx. I was thinking that's probably exactly the worst thing, the lowest priority on our list would be to add more cars in the Bronx. What can we do to limit the numbers of trucks and the problems that they bring in the borough of the Bronx?
Well, we can continue to amplify and to create new options in public transportation, and we're doing that with the 4 Metro North stations, having the ferry service, making sure that we continue to repair our roadways. But trucks and vehicles, that's not the #1 contributor to respiratory ailments. The #1 contributor is our existing buildings. And one of the things that we're doing is we're making sure that any new buildings that come up in the Bronx, certainly under my watch over the last 6 years, are built in a LEED sustainable way. And we are working and providing the finances to developers so that is at no cost to the tenants, so we can retrofit existing buildings. So the emissions from the existing buildings, that's what causes 80% of the particulate matter and the air pollution that contributes to bronchitis and asthma comes from buildings, not cars. Obviously, we're doing everything that we can whenever we deal with a company that comes in so that they can have cleaner fleets. but we need to deal with the existing housing stock. That's the reason why I have something called the Revolving Green Fund initiative that we want the city to adopt, where we put public and private dollars together so that we can holistically look and analyze an existing building, retrofit it so that they're cleaner. It helps to save the environment. It incentivizes the developers or the property owners to do so. It creates jobs, and hopefully, with the energy cost savings that they have, we can hold down the line. We can hold the line on increased rents.
I'm guessing that when you finish as borough president, whenever that is, you would like among the top notes in your legacy to be this was the development borough president, that you've brought jobs and we've had malls and we have many different examples of development in the borough of the Bronx. What seems to come up every time you hail a project or, wow, here's a new project coming in, people in the neighborhoods express concern over gentrification. You and I have talked about it on the air and off the air about these kinds of issues. How big is gentrification a concern of yours, that development will force people and price people out who have lived in some of the neighborhoods for generations, really?
I think about it every day. I think about it every time I have a developer in front of me who wants to do business in the Bronx. And that's the reason why we tell them that when they come in, there's a certain way to do business with the Bronx. Hire our folks. When people are putting up the new residential buildings, we're making sure that they're affordable. 53% of the over 16,000 units that have been built under my watch with capital dollars that I put into them have all been subsidized. And we also want to protect our professional class so that they don't leave. If they leave, then it leaves room for other people to come in. But they also take with them their resources. They take with them their employment status. They take with them their salaries. So as we continue to build and moving forward, we want to make sure that we increase a little bit of the AMI so that we can retain that workforce that we know love the Bronx, to get nostalgic about it. Now, the areas that we've rezoned, those are areas where we're not forcing people out. Those are areas that have been underdeveloped traditionally, like the waterfront on the Harlem River, areas like the southern part of the Grand Concourse. And this is a great way for us to create jobs, create density, and really build upon our brand. When you say what my legacy, well, we're working on a broad narrative, not only with development, but the housing stock, how to protect the environment, how to continue to reduce crime, restore our public parks. That's good for the Bronx. And if it's good for the Bronx, it also has to be good for the city of New York.
Let's briefly address very directly, and I remember the last time you were here, we talked about the discussion leading up to it. In the spring, I did 3 shows on the Jerome Avenue study, which is really a very optimistic project to be able to regenerate a whole section of the borough of the Bronx. But many people over there, and many people, let's say, over where the Kingsbridge Armory is being built, are very concerned. Rents are going up, commercial rents are going up, and people who've been there for years are being taken out. Now, I know you want new development. We all want new development, but is there a way to preserve things so that people who live on lower incomes can stay in their neighborhoods?
But you got to understand that we just can't leave it. We have to move forward. So when you look at the Jerome Reservoir, once we open it up, and you've been working so hard with that, my office has been working hard, all the elected officials, so that we can have it accessible to the community. We're going to have the pilot
pilot access? Sure.
Pilot access on October 3rd and October 4th. Once that opens up, that's something that people want to come and see. That's something that people want to come and experience. The High Bridge, the Kingsbridge National Ice Center, the Kingsbridge Armory has been vacant for 30 years. The Ice Center is something that we need in order to generate jobs. With that comes the increase in the property. So we have to make sure that people have the salaries that they need. That's why we continue to make sure that we have the necessary jobs for Bronxites that pay better so that they can stay right here. Now, we do things and we advocate and we lobby up in Albany with regulations, but with the amenities comes an increase in some areas of rents, and we have to make sure that people are able to afford to stay in those. We cannot dictate to a private property owner what he or she can charge or shouldn't charge for rents.
I guess
Maybe we have to continue to work maybe to incentivize them. And one of the things that I said earlier, if you help them reduce their energy costs, which is a great plan that I hope people start paying attention to in the revolving green fund, you can hold the line on the rent increases.
I guess the question is, the ultimate question, and you touched on it just now, how do you take the people with the lowest incomes and get them to a point where they can afford to live better rather than move them out?
You give them good paying jobs.
I would like to add the word education in there. I think you want a higher education and give them those kinds of opportunities.
And we do that. We invest in Lehman College, the 3 CUNYs are here in the city, in the borough of the Bronx. We help out institutions like Monroe College, and more of our Bronxites are getting that education. But we also trying to create the jobs with tech hubs. Last week, for instance, we made a huge announcement where Doran Jones, a tech company that tests software, is working with Perscolas, which trains Bronxites in computer technology and software technologies, and 150 new jobs are being created. So it's not just retail. We continue to expand our healthcare facilities. We've seen an increase of 14% last year in tourism. That creates tourism jobs. The food industry is growing. So we're doing a lot of this. That's the reason why we've been, and not only creating jobs, Gary, but creating jobs for Bronxites. That's the reason why we've been able to shave unemployment by almost half since I've been the borough president.
Let's talk some politics. I can't tell you how many people said, you've got to ask the borough president about this. And so as the emissary of the people of the Bronx, I'm going to ask you, what do you make of this switcheroo that potentially has D.A. Johnson getting a judgeship and someone handpicked? The rumor has it that it will be Judge Darcel Clark to be the new Bronx D.A. For many people, for editorial pages, this doesn't pass the smell test. What's your thought?
Well, believe it or not, and I know that some papers have been writing about this for a couple of years, till this day, Gary, even with his announcement on Friday, I have not spoken with the DA about him wanting to go to the bench. He hasn't called me. He hasn't spoken to me about this. In the spring, we had a conversation about me endorsing him for re-election. I did that fully anticipating a robust political campaign season, something that over the many years, if you interview me, I don't shy away from, right? But now he's decided to seek the bench, and before you even get to a replacement, the Bronx Democratic County Committee, which I have no role in, has to make the decision as to whether or not they will give him the what he desires, which is to go to the bench. Should that happen, then I would tell you this as the borough president, those individuals on that committee have a huge weight on their shoulders, and we'll be watching carefully, because when you look at criminal justice issues, when you look at an office as important with the gravity of the DA's office, I expect for them to make the best decision possible for the 1.4 million people that live in this borough.
So there was no dialogue. I mean, let's say Speaker Hastie didn't say to you, Marcus Crespo, nobody said to you. So let me just say, so neither the borough president, the Bronx DA, the Speaker of the Assembly, the chair of the Bronx Democratic Party, nobody said, you know what, this is anti-democratic, this is taking the vote out of the Bronx.
No, look. If you want to ask the Speaker of the Assembly that question, you can invite him on the show. You can invite Marcus Crespo on the show and ask them that. What I'm saying is that I never had this conversation with D.A. Johnson, and he put out this announcement last Friday, and now the organization has to make a decision. Whether, if you ask me, in a democracy, is the best and the most favorable, preferable outcome is to have the electorate go out into the ballot box? Absolutely. Absolutely, that's exactly what democracy is all about. But in a case like this is the law, and the law allows for someone to say, you know what, I would like to seek the bench, and then now there's a process for them to make that decision.
That is certainly what the process is at this point. Should he have just said before it was time for re-election, or to think about running, that gee whiz, I'm going to not get everybody into this, and I will say that I'm going to retire so that other people. Assemblyman Louis Sepulveda has certainly made it clear he's interested in the job. I mean, what's someone like him supposed to think? Gee, this is something I aspire to, and wow, it's kind of taken out of my hands.
Well, yeah. I mean, if we had this conversation, then maybe there could have been other candidates. You talked about, for instance, Darcel Clark, who has a wonderful resume, who has actually done something in the criminal justice area as a judge in the appellates division. No one can question her record. There are other names, Luis Sepulveda. There are other folks that have been throwing names around. With that said, I think in his statements, from what I read, what he's saying is that there's no guarantee. So if he does not get the ability or the opportunity to serve on the bench, then he'll continue to serve as district attorney.
Let's talk education. We go from one to the other because there's so much to talk about. I pulled this quote from a Bronx teacher's Facebook page that a teacher had posted. I noticed that some of my ADHD kids, the teacher wrote, were coming back from lunch with a ton of energy when that used to be when they got rid of some of it. Turns out they're not allowed to go outside anymore on the field during lunch. They're also not allowed to talk above a whisper. They can't go from table to talk with their friends. No phones, no hats. Upper and lower classmen are separated. So now, because of our extended day, some kids are going from 8 to 4 without an opportunity to release some energy. It's disgusting. So the question is...
That's a tough word.
Are we forgetting basic growth and development principles in our push for higher test scores, adding charter schools, and in the Common Core curriculums, and the pressure that it puts on both teachers and students? Are we losing our children because of this push to do something that is measurable and accountable?
In a word, yes. And I've been trying to do the best that I can with capital dollars. I just put in $1 million for PS 55 during this this fiscal budget so that they can redo their playgrounds. We've been doing that with other schools. We want to make sure that our kids are healthier. We spoke about health earlier. It starts also when they're at a very young age. Last week, the mayor of the city of New York, Mayor de Blasio, was here to make a huge announcement on computer sciences. And I thought it was a great announcement about certain areas that we need. There were some things, however, that were missing. More gifted and talented classes, for instance, more of a concentration on the arts. And of course, how is it that we give our playgrounds back to our kids? It's not just in the school buildings. The New York City Housing Authority, who has this new program to lease out property to some developers, which, by the way, I'm not totally against. Mm-hmm. I've done and financed some of these projects in the Bronx in the past, Arbor House and Forest Houses and Insomnia Houses. But when they're looking at green spaces, which is the equivalent of taking the schoolyards away from our kids in schools. Where are our kids going to play? Where are they going to be able to exercise? Where are they going to be able to spend some of that energy that this teacher is speaking of? So I think that while we plan about, in terms of the future of the city with housing and transportation and all of the things that I know that we need to do in order to make the city grow, there's just some things that you can't put money on. It shouldn't be a conversation of revenue, and that's making sure that our kids are able to play.
Is the direction of education and the philosophy of education in the schools going in the wrong direction? With Common Core and other curriculums and the push towards charter schools?
Well, I don't support Common Core and the way that it was implemented. I do support charter schools. I think that when you look at charter schools in the traditional public school system, you get more and more of the adults and their personalities that get in the way. This is about our kids, and we shouldn't make it about one side versus the other. In fact, you go to the same PS 55 that I just spoke of. They have a charter school success academy there, and this is they have a perfect synergy where the parents, the adults, the educators, the children all get along, and it's our kids in the Bronx that are being educated. So I think in the last administration, I had a lot to say against against the direction that education was going. Hopefully, with this new administration, we're gonna see him steer education back in the right way. Last week's announcement was a start.
As regards places for people to play, I think since we saw you last, I believe your last appearance here was in February. He does just about twice a year, which is excellent. We had the whole controversy with Donald Trump, and then he announced to be a candidate for president. Seems to me this is the sort of presidential candidate that you would, knowing you all these years, that you would vehemently oppose. I get the sense that you kind of made a deal with the devil, and now it's turned out to be Gee whiz, somebody I really don't want to support, and yet the Bronx is stuck with his name on this golf course. What's your thought?
Well, first of all, I support Hillary Clinton for president, number one. Number two, the negotiations and what we did with the golf course over by Ferry Point had nothing to do with politics, and had everything to do with the fact that the Bronx has been promised the development of this golf course for almost 3 decades, if not more than 3 decades. Donald Trump is an idiot. The things that he says are unacceptable, and they're offensive, and they're ugly and disgusting. But you can't take away from the fact that he was able to develop this golf course in 18 months. It created jobs, it helped with our branding, and it's sad because aside from the foolishness that we see in these debates and the things that come out of his mouth, what's even more frightening is how well he's doing in the polls with the Republican Party. It shows us that there's so much more work that needs to be done, that there's all this hate throughout the United States. Here in the Bronx, we've actually benefited from the immigrant population. We're safer, we have more job creation, we're headed in the right direction, we're blossoming and we're booming, and 41% of the 1.4 million people who live here were born in another country. So shame on Donald Trump for what he's saying, especially when the borough where we have so much diversity, so many immigrants, welcomed him as a businessman.
Do you think it will, his name on that course will hurt the success of the course? I mean, there were people who pulled their tournaments out of his other golf courses. The whole idea of having this here in the Bronx is to bring, new tournaments here. You're concerned that maybe it'll hurt?
I am, because to be honest with you, I like golfing. I can't play basketball the way I used to play. And I haven't been to the golf course, to the Trump golf course, since he announced his candidacy for president.
Mr. Borough President, always not enough time to be with you. Always more topics.
Congratulations, and I wish you another 1,000 episodes.
And I hope you'll come on over the course of those 1,000. I hope you'll be on 25 times. The Borough President of the Bronx, thank you so much. And folks, thank you for watching Bronx Talk 1,000 times. Next week, we'll talk about the North Bronx with Councilman Andy Cohn and the chair of Community Board 8. Then the week after, we will offer the exclusive preview of the book detailing the Bronx Artist Documentary Project. Thanks to our producer, Dahlia, our director, Shirley, and the cast of thousands around here. Did Michael Max Navi, you want to bring something up? They're going to give us a present for my 1,000th show.
It can't be better than this one, Daddy. It can't be better than the present you gave me.
I don't know.
This 50th anniversary special edition.
All right, what are you bringing us? Oh, it's a cake they're cutting. I don't know if they'll have it. Anyway, we'll see you all next week. Good night. Thanks.
People think I'm trash, but they're wrong. Today I'm just an aluminum can, but one day I could be a stadium.
A single ember that escapes from a wildfire can travel more than a mile. You can't control where that ember will